What California YIMBY really focused on, and what my CEO and our founder recognized, was you can get so much done faster if you change state law. The reason is that every city in the state of California, and in most states, is chartered under the state constitution. So they become a city with permission from a state. That's just sort of the way governments are structured, right? Kind of like a state became a state with permission from the federal government. Same thing. What that means is that the state has an interest in how that city governs itself. And so if you have, for example, a city that decides we're going to be 100% industrial and we're going to have nothing but high polluting factories and we're going to become a city right next to a major residential area, well, you're going to need to say, wait a second, you can't do that because the pollution doesn't stop at your borders. And so the same applies on a whole host of issues. But very importantly, the state has taken a much more active role in recognizing the impact that has on housing. Because if a city like San Francisco, which is pretty anti-housing politically now, says we're going to make it grow as slowly as we possibly can and really restrict how much homes you can build, that doesn't just impact San Francisco. That impacts the entire Bay Area. And so what's happened, because San Francisco has decades of blocking multifamily housing all over the city, is now the middle income workers and the people who serve you food in San Francisco and your nurses and your teachers, they don't live anywhere near San Francisco anymore. If they're lucky, they might live in Oakland. More likely, they live out in Tracy or Stockton, and they're commuting every day an hour and a half each way to get to work. That is a consequence of San Francisco's decision to restrict housing. Drive till you qualify. And so since it's very, very hard, and that same is true in Los Angeles, by the way, you can go to any city in the state with a couple exceptions, and it's basically the same story. They will do everything they can to block housing, and they don't care where those people end up going. Out of sight, out of mind. Oh, they drove in from 2 hours away? Well, that's a problem for the city 2 hours away. That's not our problem. The state has come in and said this is untenable, because you reach a point where not only are you pushing people into lands that are borderline, so people are moving into the desert, people are moving into areas of very high wildfire danger, people are moving into flood zones, you have sprawl going all across the landscape, and you're reaching a point where now workers are saying, it's not worth it for me to drive 2 hours each way to a job. I'm going to move to Nevada. It's not worth it for me to spend all this time and money on a house that's way the hell out in the middle of nowhere. I'm moving to Phoenix. I'm moving to Houston. I'm moving to Miami. So they're leaving the state. The middle income people are leaving California for lack of affordable housing for them closer to their jobs in the cities. And the state has said, whoa, 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 this is a huge problem. If we're pushing out the workforce, what's going to be left here in 10 or 15 years? And the answer is not a lot. A lot of retired people and nobody to take care of them. So the state has recognized this profound, almost existential interest in cracking down on cities that are blocking housing. And California YIMBY, I can say with a straight face, is really leading that push. We've put housing reform at the center of the agenda in Sacramento with the state legislature. We're known for really pushing to break open exclusionary cities and exclusionary neighborhoods to allow more housing. And it's not just a zoning problem. People think, oh, YIMBYs only care about zoning, but zoning is just one step along the way. There's fees that cities charge that are exorbitant. So you might say, okay, the zoning's okay now, but now it's going to cost you $150,000 to get a permit. Well, no, we're going to change that. We're changing the permit process so that you don't have to spend the cost of a house just to get permission to build a house. Parking requirements. A lot of cities say, you know what, if you're going to build a house, you have to provide 2 parking spots on site. So imagine a car takes up 400 square feet. Now you're going to say you have to put 2 cars on the parking lot? Well, that's 800 square feet. If you're in a 4,000 square foot lot, you've just lost 20% of your property to parking cars. And so it's those sorts of requirements the city sort of lard on top of the zoning restrictions to try to get around the spirit of what the state's trying to do, to say, hey, just allow more housing to be built. It's a long process. We're making progress. 2 years ago, we ended single-family zoning statewide, so now it's actually duplex zoning on most properties in the state. A small step, but an important step. And we're still focused on all these other things you have to do. We need more funding for subsidized housing for low-income people. We do need the transportation reforms we've been talking about. We need changes to the way you actually are allowed to build on your property. I don't think that the cities that are blocking housing and are listening to their NIMBY constituents fully understand the scale of the catastrophe they're unleashing. Just to give you an example that's immediate, the city of Cupertino, which is just over the hill here, they're closing schools because families can't afford to live there anymore. And so under the way education funding works, if you don't have that many children in a school district, you actually lose your funding, and then eventually the schools go away. That's happening already in exclusive communities like Cupertino. Some of the parents will then have the audacity to complain like, well, but my child's favorite teacher is gone. Why can't they live here anymore? And then the next week at a city council meeting, when somebody proposes teacher housing, guess what they'll say? Oh, but we're full. We don't have room for that kind of housing here. Why can't they live in San Jose? Or why can't they go live somewhere else? And they're just not connecting the dots. But if you fast forward through this process, so you have schools that close because there are no longer families moving there, the teachers are long gone. Now you're having a hard time finding in-home healthcare aides because nurses can't live anywhere close to you. Now you're opening a hotel, and the hotel is saying, well, gosh, we can't actually open because there's no more workers here to serve our customers. You can quickly see how a city can NIMBY itself into total collapse. Because if your workers can't live in the community, you lose your restaurants, you lose your teachers, you lose your police officers, you lose your firefighters, you lose your nurses, you lose the people who clean your house, you lose the people who work for your city and clean the gutters and the sewers and take out the trash. All of these people need housing. If you go for long enough saying, oh, but we're full, oh, but what about the neighborhood character? Eventually what you're going to find yourself with is a shell of a city where you have only old, rich, retired people looking around wondering where everybody went. And that's happening in some of the wealthiest, most exclusive communities in California. And it's very foreboding. If we don't get ahead of this soon, we're going to see a lot of cities like Cupertino that are just closing schools. And then you start to wonder, what are they going to close next? The restaurants are certainly going to go. Any marginal business in any community, any business that's dependent on middle income wages, so people earning, 15 to 30 to 50 bucks an hour, those people aren't going to live there anymore. And that wipes out most of your economy.